Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the editorial director with Data Science Central and also chief data scientist for Data Magnum. So I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Trifacta and Forrester for sponsoring today's event. Trifacta and Forrester are both longtime supporters of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Now, today's webinar is entitled, How to Structure a Modern DataOps Team, and that'll be presented by Trifacta and Forrester. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format for today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We have two presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Michele Goetz with Forrester and Will Davis with Trifacta. Michele is a principal analyst at Forrester. She serves enterprise architects, chief data officers, and business analysts trying to navigate the complexity of data while running an insight-driven business. Her research covers artificial intelligence, semantic technology, data management strategy, data governance, and data integration. Michele holds a degree in mathematics from Framingham State College. Now, Will is Director of Product Management at Trifacta and drives go-to-market and product marketing efforts. Now, prior to Trifacta, Will worked with a variety of companies focused on data infrastructure, analytics, and visualization, including Good Data, Greenplum, and ClearStory Data. Michele, hey, Will, thank you for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Over the past few years, the evolution of technology for storing, processing, and analyzing data has been absolutely staggering. Now, businesses now have the ability to work with data at scale and speed that many of us would never have thought possible. Yet, why are so many organizations still struggling to drive meaningful ROI from their data investments? Well, the answer starts with people. So in today's Data Science Central webinar, Michele and Will focus on the roles and responsibilities required for today's modern data ops teams to be successful. In this live webinar, we'll touch on how new data platforms and applications have fundamentally changed the traditional makeup of data analytics organizations, and how companies need to update the structures of their teams to keep up with the accelerated pace of modern business. Today you'll learn what are the foundational roles within a modern data ops team and how to align skill sets with those roles. Where does technology fit? How do the different roles interact with various components of a modern data analytics platform? And how to establish processes that optimize for speed and scale while also ensuring proper security and governance. So Will, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin just as soon as you're ready to go.
Thanks, Bill. I just wanted to give a brief introduction before I pass it off to Michele for her portion of the presentation. My name is Will Davis. I head up product marketing and product management at Trifacta. We're a data preparation provider and are extremely excited to have Michele Goetz, principal analyst at Forrester, joining us today to share her research and what she's seen in the market on how companies are organizing their teams to more effectively, efficiently use data to drive business decisions and overall strategy. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Michele for her portion of the presentation. Thanks, Bill, and thank you, Michele, for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Will, and thanks, Bill. It's great to be joining Trifacta today. This is obviously a topic that is near and dear to my heart. like all of you, we've been struggling with data and trying to transition it into value for our business for quite some time. That hasn't always been an easy process. We use a lot of technology to try to transition data and monetize it, but sometimes we forget, what are the best ways to, transform that data? What are our processes? How do we communicate? How do we collaborate? What does that operations workbench look like? And that's hopefully what we can detangle here and, show that there is, light at the end of the tunnel, and companies are figuring out ways to make this possible. And how do you enable that process and create that center of excellence that is your modern data ops team? So the first thing to maybe kind of put this into perspective is, it's not just the fact that we are capturing all of this data. It's not just the fact that we want to do analytics and get great insights that helps in our decision processes. We're really thinking about how do we transform our businesses with digital capabilities that automate, augment, and transform how we operate as an organization, as a business, and the experiences that we bring to the marketplace for our customers. So it's really no surprise at this point that you're seeing, almost 2/3 of companies, expanding their digital investments. And coinciding with this is digital doesn't run well, doesn't produce value without data and analytics behind it. And as such, as you see increases in digital investment, you're also seeing significant increases from companies between their budgets between 2017 to 2018. More than half of organizations are increasing those budgets. And interestingly enough, you can look at 1/3 of companies overall see their budgets increasing at 5% or more. Now, the reason why this is happening and where digital and data comes together is we're transitioning our analytics practices from just asking questions and trying to run calculations against our data and really trying to simulate what our business looks like and hypothesize against what that simulation of the business is to create a real digital twin. Well, what do we mean by a digital twin? A digital twin allows us to take our information, see our environment, see how our business runs, what our customers are doing, what our partners are doing, what we're doing as an operation, the actions and decisions that we make, and how those correlate together, and visualize that. In the case of someone like Uber, they simulate ride sharing and ask questions within that simulation to say, what happens when you have 50 drivers, 75 drivers, 125 drivers, 250 drivers? How does that change experience? How does that change profitability? How much does that change expenses? You can really start to model this. The next piece of it is once you begin with that simulation, that model, that digital twin of your organization, you can put that into action and roll that out into digital capabilities that are starting to understand, learn, and interpret what decisions and actions can be taken from this and operate your business off of real-time analytics. Now, the reason why we're doing this is we want to avoid the perishability of our insights. It's great to have visualizations of information, run these simulations, figure out what types of decisions and actions we can take upon them. But if we're looking at information that is too old and is not representative of what's happening today, if we get those decisions but it takes us, a week, 2 weeks, 6 months to act upon them, we have missed the window of opportunity within our marketplace to actually benefit from what those insights are telling us. So really the first thing we need to kind of consider is how do we operationalize and enable insights in our business so that we're linking together time and results so that we get the best benefits out of what we're investing in our analytic practices. It also comes down to how well do we trust our information. Ultimately, what data is providing is that perspective of the environment. It's creating that visualization, that simulation of what operates in there. Really good examples are coming up today as we hear about machine learning and AI coming to markets and some of the big, internet players that are out there. You can take a look at Amazon with pulling back on their AI recruitment capability because information was coming out biased. And so, we have a data quality issue there. They have to rethink what that looks like. It started from the beginning of garbage in, garbage out. That's what Amazon says. Or if Microsoft is running Tay within the Twitter sphere and learning from conversations, being influenced by the type of information and comments and social interactions that happen there, Tay becomes, biased and bigoted and not somebody that you really would want to communicate with over time. So really tying together not just the fact that you need insight to power digital, but really being very mindful about the types of information that is most relevant, appropriate, and actionable to make the best decisions. To do this, you really need a cross-functional team that brings a variety of expertise around data, analytics, digital experiences, and ultimately the business expertise so that you're orienting your tasks in the right direction. And this is really where organizations struggle. Only 39% are really kind of getting this right at this point. So we need to amp up that center of excellence and build towards data operations. So what does a data center of excellence help you to avoid, and what sort of things do you need to address? Well, as we talked about, you need to bring the right expertise to the table, the data, the analytics, the digital capabilities, and ultimately the business expertise. You need to enable the right communications between those teams, trying to create that lingua franca across them so that when your data engineer speaks about data and bringing that into an analytic capability, when the data scientist speaks back to the data engineer to communicate what is needed, you're getting what is necessary and the appropriate type of information. And the data scientist has to understand and interpret what the business stakeholders are asking for, or what they're trying to understand and interpret, or how they're going to use the analytics within digital experiences, and then also the collaboration to put that into real-time practices and businesses, with the DevOps teams. That requires a good foundational process that enables that collaboration. And we don't want to forget the governance controls. That doesn't just happen when you're trying to govern and steward the appropriate data, but you're going to also manage your models and the version control and optimization of those models. You're going to be watching and looking at how your analytics runs in state. And then you're also going to be thinking about how are you versioning and improving and optimizing these capabilities as they move forward. So when we talk about the fact that we need data ops, and that center of excellence becomes your data ops practice, what are we talking about? It's really about the data development phase used as a type of agile relationship between DevOps and data engineering. This is really the first step to ensure that the right information is coming together in a way that is going to power your data science and ultimately power your digital capabilities and drive your business engagement. And so it really begins with kind of rethinking a bit about data in the context of traditional ways that we approached analytics and the new ways that we approach analytics. In the past, as I talked about before, it was a Q&A function. I have a question. What was my revenue? How is my profitability? What products are my customers buying? And then it might lead to another question. So you would run calculations and look at charts and dashboards to get that information. And that's all coming through a pre-prepared environment. The visualizations are already set. There's quite a rigidity around it because we know these questions all the time, and we're going to set them up so you can look at them at particular points in time and maybe trend those over a period of time so that we can stay on top of the performance of our business. But doing so means that you have to intake all those requirements up front, and you have to build the perfect solution to develop that end product. And we used a lot of waterfall practices in the past and wouldn't release things until everything was built in, tested, and there was no challenges around that. Well, the next phase of that is that starts taking too long, and you get complaints from your business and analytics teams that we can't wait for answers. a week may not be fast enough. We want answers today. The notion of being able to run analytics in a self-service way, ask questions, and, as inquisitiveness and creativeness comes up about what you see in your performance management reports and the intelligence that you've already been getting, being adaptive to that, recognizing that today's analytics is founded on the fact that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what questions are going to be there, and we need to be able to gather data and prepare that information as questions are starting to emerge. And not only does that happen very iteratively in an agile fashion, but the speed at which this has to occur needs to be faster, again, to avoid those perishable insights or the potential of perishable insights that we talked about earlier. So what does the tribe look like now? We start to connect the dots between all of the experts that come to the table within the DataOps function and really recognize what that right expertise is and how that expertise is not just siloed within the particular tasks of what they need, each role needs to do on a day-to-day basis, but where they start to come together. So the first four roles on this chart you're probably very well aware with. The data scientists, the engineers, the stewards, and the architects. They're working at various levels of monetizing and bringing data to value within the organization. The data scientist, from a data ops perspective, is really using search capability and discovery to understand and interpret what data is available, what they have, what they can use, what's relevant. They want to shape that data to fit into the ways that they're going to run the analysis, the types of algorithms they're going to use, and they're going to apply those assumptions through a step-by-step function, and you want to be able to enable the capture of those steps in that preparation because data scientists don't want to continuously rework. So, we're thinking about not only what they do, but how do you enable that. The data engineers come in and do the heavy lifting on the data side. What data is available? How should it be interpreted and shaped so that when data scientists search for it, they understand it and can make sense and know if it's relevant. They're also going to set up repeatable pipelines for those types of sources that are going to be continuously managed and governed and stewarded over time because you're repeatedly going to go back to them. And they're also going to understand and interpret the types of models and preparation steps that data scientists have taken in order to shape the data, not only for analytics, but demonstrating that there's use within the organization for that information and getting value out of it. The stewards come in, often the last people to come to the table around data. They're kind of playing cleanup all the time, but in this new world of data ops, they live side by side all the time. Part of the requirements around the data, from what the data scientists and analysts have, from what the data engineers need to be doing, all need to conform to corporate policies, business unit policies, regulatory controls, but also the determination around how data will provide value. What is the appropriateness of it? Being experts about what the data is available and what that data means and the opportunities around those data. So when we look at things like policies, definitions, standards, rules, and the semantic models that data stewards are contributing, they are operating not only on a defensive aspect, but on an offensive aspect to better facilitate and speed up the activation of data within analytics and use. Building the scalable platforms, really understanding and interpreting the near and real-time interaction with data, both from an analytics perspective as well as it's being put up to use in that digital environment, and how can they engineer the platforms that allow for that adaptation, that iteration, that collaboration that these roles are going to require, and then allow that to scale out, not just for a single use cases, but all conceivable use cases that can come to the business. And then lastly, the new role at the table is your robot, that virtual architect, steward, engineer, and even analyst this is where machine learning is really starting to step up into the DataOps workbench to operate through intelligence, understand, interpret, classify, tag, link data together, provide the foundations of intimately knowing and understanding the data, seeing where it's provided value in the past, and helping to organize and serve that data up and take away some of the tedious and manual capabilities that we do today from a stewardship, engineering, and architect, and even an analyst perspective. So one of the ways to speed up insights to action is being able to continuously running an intelligent capability behind the scenes within that DataOps capability. It's all roles. And so understanding first how communication happens around those specifics of each of those roles, you also have to understand how these roles communicate the requirements and their perspectives around that data, both manually through annotations as well as what they're inferring just by interacting with that data. And that's really where the DataOps workbench begins, is the ability to share that tribal knowledge and scale that expertise, and as well as the fact of using that machine learning within our bots to help support that and scale that as well, and also contribute to that conversation to open up bottlenecks or reduce the fuzziness about what's going on with our data. The collaboration itself starts to work out more in a tiger team today rather than the analysts and data scientists working off on their own, coming up with interesting information and then offloading that to the expert. You now have a team. That workbench is highly collaborative. They're interoperating around meaningful insights. Everybody has the same objective of coming to those meaningful, actionable insights and the ability to deploy those insights. It is not by happenstance that your app dev teams start to become more and more involved, because as they're instrumenting the microservices and the containers that are running in the digital applications and devices, they need to be able to easily consume the models and the APIs and the data containers that are available through there. And that is not an easy task. So you start to see where each one of the roles in the experts helps to provide the right information back to the developers to make sure that you can move from the labs and the experiments and the insights coming from analytics and push that into the real-time digital capabilities. This is an area where we typically have not paid close attention to in the way that we instrument our platforms. Data management teams and engineering teams and even stewards had focused around data sitting and living in databases. App dev and stakeholders are thinking about how data and insights is put to use upstream within applications. So the DataOps workbench is really providing capabilities around the preparing and pipelining of information to go from data at rest into the activation of data. And within here, you will notice from sourcing to blending to standardizing, cleansing, delivering, and repeating this process, scaling that process out, how your engineers, your stewards, your analysts, and your developers, even your bots, are all working together, taking on the task for each one of these components to make it easier, faster to create these pipelines, to harmonize data and analytics together, and ensure that you're starting to move towards a push-button function of bringing insights to life within your data capabilities. So not just thinking about the people and the process component, but also recognizing where technology steps up and enables and supports this and drives the right collaboration, communication, and best practices to enable your digital capabilities. So from that point of view, what starts to happen from a stewardship perspective is stewardship isn't just command and control and the culture of no. That defensive component is always going to be there, but today that is table stakes in the benefits that's assumed from managing and controlling the quality of data by ensuring that data is providing value and avoiding a lot of the pitfalls of data quality and perishable insights. Now, stewardship and quality is really seen as an offensive benefit. And this is where the DataOps team is starting to also help to transform a lot of the activities on the data governance side to ensure that data governance becomes much more a strategic function versus a tactical control and rule center. So how do we start to put this into action? So number one, it's about bringing those business and technical expertise together and having it coincide so that it's really translating data into insights and business value. It's ensuring that you have the right coordination and orchestration across the communication and the activities that are occurring, having that happen in real time, enabling that, ensuring that you're stripping away the time to communicate and the time to take action as you're preparing your data for analytic and digital mechanisms. You want to operate in an agile fashion. Analytics is inherently iterative. You have new questions, you're testing new theories, new hypotheses, you're getting insight from some of the early outcomes, whether it's something that you already knew and it was confirming, or whether it's going to, or whether there were new insights that you need to take into account and you didn't realize, new biases that were introduced by bringing in more and more relevant information that shapes the digital twin of your environment. And so you need to have the practices that allow you to test and learn and scale in an iterative fashion, and really using Agile and an Agile Scrum team to make that happen. That's really where your ops workbench starts to come in. You want to ensure that you're always thinking about how data connects to the rest of your business processes, not just within the way that you operate around your data, but upstream into your business processes, because that's where activation happens of data and insight, and you translate it into value. So balancing your data ops practices with your business practices. And then lastly, don't forget that you still need controls as a discipline, but don't create that as a restrictive quality. Ensure that you have an offensive strategy for your data governance and stewardship. So I'm gonna pause there and hand it back over to Will. Hope you got some things to be thinking about here, and we can talk about Trifecta.
Great. Thanks, Michele. Really valuable insights into what you're seeing in the market, giving a definition of what DataOps is, the different roles, responsibilities of different team members within a DataOps organization, and how that's driving value for businesses. So really appreciate your overview there. So for my portion of the presentation, about 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a brief introduction into Trifacta, and then dive into some of our own research into how our customers and how organizations are organizing their teams to take advantage of data preparation within the DataOps context. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Trifacta is one of the leading organizations offering data preparation solutions. We've been recognized by multiple analyst firms, including Forrester and several others, as the leading vendor in data preparation. And our focus is enabling the people who know the data best, data analysts, business experts, to be able to do the work of exploring, preparing data for a variety of different analytic outputs, whether that's visualization, machine learning, or reporting. And I'll talk to you a little bit how that plays into the DataOps context as we move forward. So, what's leading to data preparation adoption? I think you've seen sort of the advent of modern BI solutions in the data visualization space with the rise of vendors like Tableau, Qlik, and others gain popularity from traditionally IT-led processes to more frontline business-led processes. And now we're also seeing that within data integration and ETL, and Trifacta is one of the vendors that is leading that charge. So some of the shifts you're seeing that are leading to this adoption include who's doing the work. So traditionally, data integration processes of the past were typically IT-led. So if I'm a business user and I want access to data, I'm going to go to my IT counterpart who manages our ETL environment, give them a set of requirements, and then that person will implement a workflow that will typically take a few weeks to implement and then deliver me data. So that process wasn't agile, it wasn't iterative, and was typically led to a lot of mistakes and a lot of pain, both from the IT side and also from the business side. So we're seeing a shift into that work being driven and being hands-on delivered by IT to front-end data analysts, the people who have the context for the data and the people that want to access the data and deliver the transformations that they need to start their analysis. So we're seeing a big shift in who's doing this work of cleaning, joining, prepping data for whatever type of analysis. We're also seeing a shift in just data in general. So, big data we've heard many times before, volume, variety, velocity, but we're seeing just organizations looking at data as a strategic investment. They're looking to take advantage of a wider variety of data sources for different analytic initiatives. And as Michele mentioned earlier, they're trying to transition from sort of known knowns about their business into more exploratory analysis around, what are our unknowns and how do we start chipping away at some of those analysis. And so those shifts are happening, and organizations are investing in how do we provide more efficiency and more exploratory types of analysis across our business to gain a competitive advantage. And then you're also seeing a platform shift. So from organizations moving from desktop or server-based technologies to modern platforms, modern analytic infrastructure in the cloud. And so, it's no surprise that as the cloud gains more and more adoption, the applications and the processes that govern data and analytics are also going to shift to be running on the cloud. And so Trifecta plays a part in sort of all of this. So we're focused on enabling the people who know the data best to do the preparation work, making sure that we're aligning with IT to make sure those processes are secure and governed. We plug into all the big data platforms or technologies that have arisen to be able to work with greater varieties of data, a wide diversity of formats and structures of data. And we're also cloud native, so we run on all three major cloud vendors and be able to plug in seamlessly to all these cloud services that are rising up around data processing and analytics. So we're sort of being able to take advantage of all of these three major shifts in the data and analytics industry and play a critical part in enabling organizations to drive success with their analytic initiatives. So, we've seen success while we've been in market over the past 4 years. I think two to three of the biggest verticals we see success in primarily are financial services, insurance, and healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So as you can see from the brands that are listed in this slide, some of the largest organizations across the Fortune 500 have selected Trifacta as their data preparation platform of choice and are deploying that across multiple divisions within their organizations. So I'd say from a adoption perspective, we are definitely seeing a pattern across those industries specifically. Some of the organizations like JPMC, Bank of America, and financial services, insurance, New York Life, USAA, and then healthcare and pharmaceuticals with Kaiser. I'll show you an example of Kaiser later, and then GSK. And we're also seeing organizations in retail and CPG and government agencies also drive adoption of data preparation for different customer analytics initiatives, compliance initiatives with the government, or some of the cutting-edge analysis that's happening in the CDC and NASA. So we've seen great success in driving adoption across some of the world's most cutting-edge organizations in terms of how they leverage and utilize data. So from a packaging and go-to-market perspective, we offer a single platform, and we offer different editions of that platform. It's a common user experience. There's common metadata and logic that relates to the transformations you develop in our platform, and then that can run in a variety of different environments depending upon your use case, your data volume, and how you want to deploy the product. So we have a free edition for anyone to go out and start using. It's a completely cloud-based app. There are some limitations on data volume and functionality within the product, but this has been a great way for us to, for users to get a sense of what we do and trying our product hands-on without having to go down a lengthy evaluation process. We've built a community of tens of thousands of users on that free product and offer free community support, training, and certification, and various things like that. We also offer a product called Trifacta Wrangler Pro that is more focused on smaller teams and departments and has broader connectivity, broader functionality around scheduling and how to put those workloads into production. That's deployed as a cloud service, and we provide enterprise support on that. And then we have an enterprise product that you can deploy on-prem on a on-premise Hadoop environment or in the cloud with our support for AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud that provides sort of all-in-one solution offering with advanced functionality around security, around integration, around connectivity, and all the bells and whistles with that product. So that's sort of an overview of what we do, what we're focused on, why we're seeing adoption, and how we sell our platform. So one of the things that we see a lot in the market from our customers and our users is, who's the user of data preparation or of Trifacta? How do we organize our team to successfully adopt this technology? And who are the different stakeholders we must tie in to even purchase a solution? So we've done a lot of work across our user experience team, across our product management team, in looking at who are the key stakeholders, both from the user perspective and also from broader integration and alignment, and how do we really make sure that we are reaching their needs and we really understand them? So if there are features of the product that specifically are built for that persona, that we're meeting their needs, and also from a go-to-market perspective and from a support perspective, we understand the desires of the different individuals we're interacting with and making sure that we're meeting their needs for what they need to drive in their role. So upon this research, this is a multi-month process that we went and interviewed almost all of our customers and a lot of our users of our free product, and came back and synthesized all of this data down into a presentation that I'll be sharing clips from through the rest of the presentation. Now, this is driven by our PM and UX team, so I wish I could claim credit for this content, but it was driven by their team. And these are personas. It's critical to know that personas are always changing. So what we present this year may be different from what we present next year as the roles and responsibilities change. But this is sort of a current clip on what we see in the market and what we see from our customer organizations. And it also maps very well to what Michele presented earlier. So we see 5 direct Trifacta personas. And in the next slide, I'll chat about sort of how we see these people divvying up across users and across administrators. So there are 2 primary users of data preparation or of Trifacta in this sense. One is the data analyst. They are the ones that are going to be exploring data, doing the cleaning, blending, aggregation of data that is required prior to their analysis. And whether that's some visualization, some report, or some statistical analysis, we were able to support a broad variety of downstream analytic efforts. We also have a data engineer, and I'll talk through their role, but they're sort of part end user and part administrator. So depending upon the organization, they may be prepping data for analysts to go then and take a step farther and further preparation, but primarily they're focused on scaling operations and scaling data pipelines so that the broader organization can make use of that work. We also engage a fair amount with data scientists. What we've seen as a pattern is that they are probably most focused on interacting with data in coding environments, but from a collaboration, from a scaling perspective, do see a lot of value in data preparation solutions like Trifacta. And then the 2 secondary or tangential personas that we see are the data architect, which is mostly focused on technology decisions and needs to be bought in as both an administrator of Trifacta and also a sponsor of the initiative. And then also an analytics leader, so someone within a line of business or also could be within IT that's leading an initiative where data preparation plays a key role. So this could be a business initiative such as Customer 360, such as a new risk and analytics initiative in insurance, or it could be an initiative driven by IT and focused on modernizing our analytics processes and our analytics technology. And so we see a variety of those instances in how we engage with the market generally. So focusing on the users first, data analysts, these individuals are, well understood. They're delivering data to stakeholders so they can drive decision making. And so in the founding of Trifacta, we were most focused on meeting the needs of these users. So these users were typically bottlenecked in the data preparation process because they didn't have the skill sets, the code to build data preparation, and they didn't have access to ETL to do their own data preparation work. So we sort of redesigned the interface and also some of the processes that allow data analysts to do the preparation work themselves. This allows them to access data more quickly and also allows them to get to an analytic output that they can then build their analysis off of much faster. And they're doing this all in collaboration with IT, not outside of IT. So we're very focused, as Michele said, at making sure that the governance and security policies that you set as an organization aren't thrown out when you're enabling analysts to do this data preparation work. They are instilled so that data analysts can access data more freely, but also do so in a way that's governed, that's secure, and then we provide visibility into the work that they're doing. So in the data preparation workflow, these users are the users that are building the data preparation pipelines and the workflows that can serve the needs for their unit or broader business units as they are collaborated upon within the organization. So then the data engineer is mostly focused on taking the workflows that, let's say, an analyst builds and then figuring out how do we test those, how do we scale those, how do we operationalize those in a sense and set up the scheduling, monitoring processes that those can be delivered in production. So if you think about the innovation flow that happens, an analyst is the one who comes up with the insight, who comes up with the data preparation workflow, then transitions that to the data engineer to say, hey, we should run this across our whole marketing department so everyone can take advantage of this new analysis. And so the data engineer is typically the handoff point from some new preparation workflow that's driven by an analyst that then gets put into production by the engineer. So it's scalable, so it's repeatable, so it's hardened, so the broader organization can take advantage of it. In a lot of cases, we also see data engineers doing some of the initial prep work. So let's say an analyst may not be as sophisticated and know how to use data preparation, to a larger extent. They'll do some upfront prep work to then provision data for their end users to take a hold of. But more often than not, their main focus is taking existing pipelines driven by their analysts and users and running those in production. And then data scientists, so as I mentioned before, these are end users of data preparation and of Trifacta. We categorize them as a secondary end user because we believe in most cases a lot of times they want to use Python, they want to use R, they want to use Java to do their own data preparation work rather than use user interface to do that. But more and more we are seeing data scientists at organizations that realize collaboration is critical to their work, so using a common interface to allow other people to understand the work they're doing and collaborate on that is critical to gaining success across the organization. Scaling some of these processes, so running some of their workflows at scale across the organization can be difficult, so a common platform that can scale like Trifacta is also key to them. So we are seeing, although they're not the primary end user, we are seeing them more and more within our customer base, especially as the democratization of machine learning and data science continues to take place with vendors like a Data Robot, a Domino Data Lab, allowing more and more analysts to sort of dip their toe or extend into data science through some automation there. So if you look at the mental models of these personas and how they are different from sort of what types of tools they like to use and how they think and what they're focused on, here we have the analysts in yellow. So they're mostly familiar with or focused on the manual interaction with data. So traditionally that's been done in Excel or on visual tools like Tableau. So that's their sort of mental model and sort of how they work with data, what interfaces they're familiar with, and how they drive the transformation process. And in Trifacta, we've done a lot of work to provide a very familiar spreadsheet-like interface that they're able to leverage to drive the transformation process that looks a lot like Excel, looks a lot like some of the work they can do. Tableau is driven by machine learning to help guide them through the process and make it faster, more efficient, and accurate. If you look at the data engineer, they're tending towards the operationalization and architecture. So they're thinking about scalable systems. They're thinking about, how do I develop pipelines that can run efficiently, perform efficiently, and not fail over. So their mind frame, it tends to be focused on, how do we build processes that drive innovation, but also drive efficiency, performance, and reliability as well. And then from a data scientist perspective, they tend to be in two ways. One, with visual programming, so very, very familiar with common visual programming models such as R, where they can develop a code and then get some visual feedback around that. And then also a lot more focused on scripting and macros, so developing one-off scripts to put up a certain data set or to build a certain data pipeline in things like Python. And so that's where they tend to drive towards, and that's sort of why we see them as an end user, but are less focused on them as a primary end user because of that, because they'd rather use code. So then moving on to sort of the tangential non-end user personas that we see in our deployments, the most critical being, or one of the most critical being the data architects. So these are the individuals that make all the decisions around what are the technologies we're putting in place, both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a tooling standpoint, and making sure all of that speaks together appropriately. So they make decisions on the data platform, whether that's running on-prem, whether that runs on the cloud, whether we're leveraging Hadoop, whether we're leveraging some cloud service, and also all of the applications for data preparation, for governance and cataloging, for visualization and analytics, making sure all of those work well together and that they scale and that they're moving in the direction of the modern stack. So the way we interact typically with a data architect is ensuring that our product works in their environment, that it scales to their needs, that it's performant, and that it matches all the security and governance requirements that these organizations and these data architects, in a sense, are in charge of and managing. So it's mostly a technical evaluation for fit, for performance, for security that the data preparation solution and Trifacta have to be able to abide by. And then that leads me to the last persona we're going to cover today, which is the analytics executive. So the way we think about this individual, it could be someone who's a VP of analytics. It could be someone who's a director or VP of a certain line of business, such as marketing or such as risk analysis. But they have the business initiative that is driving the investment into data preparation. They recognize that they need to either leverage a broader set of data, that they need to turn around analytics faster, and they need new tools and technology to be able to do that. And so this person is driving the budget, driving the initiative to make these initiatives happen, and then aligning themselves with the data architect to make sure that this is a technically fit solution within our environment, and also the end users, whether that's a data analyst, a data engineer, or a data scientist, to make sure that these are technologies that they're going to adopt, that they like, and that they'll be able to use for the business initiative that they're trying to drive from. So with a few more slides left, I just want to chat about, so how does this workflow, how do these personas interact within a workflow? So if I'm a data architect, if I'm a data analyst, if I'm a data engineer, where are the touch points that I have within a chain of building a data preparation pipeline? And how do we ensure that the right people are taking on the right parts of the process? So I have a quick scenario here where we have a data architect, Mike, and some of the responsibilities they have are creating connections to data, provisioning data, making sure that sensitive elements of data aren't present for end users, and also making sure that collaboration between data analysts and data engineers is happening effectively. From an analyst perspective, in this case TAN, they're accessing data, they're building their transformation workflow, they're doing the hands-on work for exploring, profiling data, doing standardization, maybe blending. They're doing all the work to the data itself that needs to happen before it can be output to analysis. And then from a data engineer perspective, once I receive that workflow from a data analyst, I can make sure that it's valid and then implement that in a production pipeline and set up the schedule and the outputs that are required to make the broader organization, to allow the broader organization to make use of this and to make sure that this is running in a well-governed, performant, reliable environment. So here is an example of sort of how this workflow takes place. We like to use the concept of raw, refined, and production. So raw is when, hey, we have a bunch of raw data from different systems. We're going to drop it into a common environment. That could be a data lake on Hadoop or in the cloud. The architect is typically setting up that environment and setting up access to those data sources. So then once they're loaded in, the analyst can just pick them up, start organizing them, structuring them, exploring the value of that, and then transforming them into the appropriate structure that can be leveraged for their analysis. And then once they've gotten to the point where the structure is in a specific format that they're ready to then say, hey, this is the data output that I want to drive moving forward for this analysis, they will then do a handoff to the engineer, in this case Athena, that will then drive the evaluating the workflow, setting it up to run it in a production environment, and operationalizing, governing, and also configuring with the architect how do we set up the outputs where this data can be consumed across the broader organization, and also make sure that it's visible that we have governance over this process. So in the refine stage, you'll see that there is some modeling phases that typically happen. If you have machine learning or data science use case, that is typically where that work will happen by the data scientist. And then if you look at sort of a case study we have at one of our customers, Kaiser Permanente, this is an example of how they view this process and how this process works at their organization. So you'll see that depending upon the organization, depending upon how they set up roles and responsibilities, that how this works may differ from organization to organization. So here you're seeing data architect develops the infrastructure, develops the environment that they call the landing zone, but then the data engineer does a lot of some of the initial structuring and pre-processing of the data that then allow the analyst to make use of it and build their workflows and then build a preparation cycles that then get operationalized downstream by the data engineer and also by the architect that then eventually get consumed in the production environment by the analytics executive that is then driving the decision making and the business initiatives that this data will drive. So that's a use case, high-level view of how this works in a live production environment with our customer, Kaiser. And some of the analysis that they do is focused on staffing analysis, HR analysis, and they also have some analysis within this environment that looks at predicting incidences of the flu based on different factors that they see in their patients. So with that, that's just an overview of what we see in the market, an overview of Trifacta as a vendor. Hopefully it provides some value to those, and I think it maps really well to what Michele is also seeing in the market. If you have questions, feel free to visit our website. We also have our free product, as I mentioned earlier, Wrangler, so you can go to that domain, trifacta.com, start wrangling, and get your hands on Trifacta and get moving. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Bill to lead the Q&A.
Well, hey, Michele, Will, hey, thank you for that excellent presentation. And we'll get started with today's Q&A session. I want to thank the audience for their participation. Had a lot of questions that have come in, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this Q&A session, I'll leave up this screen with contact information for Michele and Will in case you'd like to get a hold of them following today's webinar. So let's get started. This one's probably for Michele. Audience is wondering, we're hearing more and more about DataOps. What exactly has led to this becoming such a popular practice, and are there any specific industries that are leading in this more than others?
So I think what you're finding is kind of going back to what I introduced before. It's one thing to bring data into a database and then, opening that up so that somebody can, put their analytic capability on top, whether that's something like Tableau or whether you're, coding with Python and R from your data science perspective. But, ensuring that you can now take that data and take those models and put them into your applications, have them run experiences on devices and kiosks and in other, and experiences that you might even have within a store. You see Lowe's going around with robots and so on. That's really having companies rethink what is the mechanism that draws together the things that were happening within a silo, within analytics, how data was being done in a silo and only taking it to the point of the database, and then leaving the DevOps teams trying to figure out, well, now what do I do with all of this? And it was complicated and it was misunderstood. And so DataOps has really risen from taking what data architects were trying to engineer in terms of their platforms and now having roles within there that are developers, but developers with data expertise, not having app developers who really don't understand the landscape and the requirements around the data. And so, not only does data engineering as a role come up to facilitate what types of skills and expertise is needed to help shape the data for models and experiences, but that isn't something that you can also do on your own. So data operations is really the mechanism that we're seeing companies from, Bombardier to MasterCard to Kaiser Permanente, all these firms coming together and recognizing that everybody's got to be on the same developer workbench. You all have to work in concert in a tightly orchestrated fashion to bring your digital experiences and visions to life.
Well, Michele, thank you for that answer. Now, did your research focus just on large companies, or more directly, folks are wondering how do small and mid-sized companies get involved in this? Do the roles change?
So the interesting thing is that a lot of the best practices that you're seeing for data ops coming into the large organizations or from even a corporate environment was born out of companies that were creating software products, creating hardware products. Agile development really is a core competency to delivering on technical capabilities. And so, I think what you really found was the startup communities demonstrating, better ways, faster ways of getting value into the market, and then seeing that starting to transition into maybe first some of the larger companies and enterprises, but, we're seeing this, across the board, whether you're super large, whether you're just on the large side, whether you're medium or whether you're small, this is a practice that really works everywhere.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks. Now, a question maybe both of you want to tackle, and the audience is wondering about something very fundamental, and that is DataOps and Trifacta specifically meant to replace ETL? Is it separate from ETL? Does it supplement? What's the relationship with the old ETL practices?
So I can take a first stab at that. This is a question we get quite a bit. If you have the easiest way to conceptualize this, I think, is if you have an existing ETL process that's working, that is running effectively, then there's no need to replace it. We don't want to replace ETL in that sense if it's already working for your organization. We like to say if there's a modernization effort happening, if there are net new use cases that are being developed, that data preparation is probably the appropriate solution for you to do that in the most efficient, cost-effective manner versus delivering or doing that through ETL. So our focus is mostly on use cases that are net new, use cases that involve end users as the ones that are building up the preparation workflows, and ones that can be done in sort of a modern environment that leverages either a modern platform such as Hadoop on-prem or in the cloud. And that's sort of how we think about things moving forward.
Will, thanks. And kind of a parallel question, if clients already have, for example, Alteryx or Tableau, what is the reason for migrating, say, to Trifacta to do data prep for DataOps?
Yeah, sure. So I think taking those one at a time, and we can probably take this offline if this is a bigger concern. I think some of the companies that go with Trifacta, maybe say over an Alteryx or over a Tableau, can be, one from a governance perspective. So, Alteryx is typically delivered in a single server or desktop environment, and IT doesn't have a lot of governance or visibility into the work that's being done there. Second could be scale. So both Tableau Prep and Alteryx, aren't sort of built on modern technology infrastructure, so there are some scaling issues. And then also just deployment and modernization initiatives. If companies are moving towards cloud and moving to a modern set of technologies, that they want to build modern tools that integrate into those platforms, and that's another reason why they're choosing us. I could get into a lot of depth on feature by feature functionality into all those different things, but I'll save you. But do reach out. We're happy to go through that in detail and why customers choose that and how to think about those things.
Well, thanks. And Michele, Will, hey, thank you. Some great answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions today that weren't answered, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Michele and Will and the Trifacta team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. Now, I have just a couple of brief announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for October 31st, tomorrow, Halloween, and that's our next DSC webinar, which will be state-of-the-art deep learning on Apache Spark. Also remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks to Trifacta and Forrester for their sponsorship, and particularly our speakers, Michele Goetz and Will Davis, for their terrific insights into today's topics. So this is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on October 31st. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Michele.